thanks everyone for taking the time for joining us. As Jenny says, we've got a whole load of you on today, which is great. Some new faces and some familiar people who we're working with already. So good to see you all. Thanks for taking the time today. Yeah, as Jenny mentioned today, we're going to be talking with RBH. We've got Zoe and Bede joined us today, who we've been working with for a couple of years, just talking us through how things have changed and prioritization and sort of working through self-service projects throughout the pandemic and before and after, and how that sort of looked for them going forwards as well in terms of what comes next. So that'll be the agenda for today. But yeah, we'll start with some quick intro. If you wouldn't mind keeping mics on mute for now, that'd be great, just to minimize background noise so everyone can hear. But please do use the chat pane, ask any questions that you want to, and now we'll have some time to sort of address those towards the end. So please feel free, and there'll be some links and things dropped in there by a couple of the Proto guys as well. So look out for those. But yeah, today, RBH on with us today, so we'll move through into that shortly, and then at the end some time for Q&A. So if there is anything you want to ask, feel free, and we'll either get to that today or we can follow up with you afterwards as well. But yeah, just to start with, I suppose, just a bit of a quick intro into us as an agency. So Jenny and I both work for Proto. We are a digital transformation specialist who've been specialising in the housing sector for over 16 years. We're working with a number of housing associations across the UK at the moment. I think we've probably worked with hundreds over the years. But yeah, we're here with the aim of transforming the relationship essentially between housing providers and their residents at every stage of that journey through digital solutions, with the overarching goal, I suppose, of improving customer experience and assisting with internal process efficiencies as well. Now, this comes in the form of user experience optimized websites, customer portal, digitizing lettings application processes, all with the idea of, I suppose, helping you guys as housing professionals spend your time as effectively as possible, freeing up that internal resource to spend with those residents and customers who need that emotionally attached or value-added support the most, I suppose. So that's where we fit into the sector. Hopefully you've heard of us before. So yeah, that's us. Briefing. We do record all of these sessions. You might see that this session's been recorded today. We've done many of these since I think we started just around lockdown 1. So if you would like to go back and have a little look of any previous sessions, feel free to do so, or even one today. You can do that on our video hub. So there'll be a link in the chat pane there for you to do that. But we've covered all sorts of topics over the years, from different guest speakers, different topics we've sort of covered ourselves. So please do have a little look in there, because I'm sure there'll be something in there that'll potentially pique your interest. But I suppose to start with, before we get into the main sort of part of this session, just wanted to touch upon some news really, which is that all of you, or at least some of you, are planning your trip to CIH's Housing 2022 in Manchester at the end of June. We'll be attending again. We'll be exhibiting, bringing our shiny rocket van, which some of you may have seen last year, and we'll be translating our. Oh, sorry. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, we'll be converting our Housing Hive session, which you're obviously on today, in webinar format, into the Housing Hive live sessions as well. So we'll be hosting a number of different talks from our stand around product demos of some of the things we can offer, from websites through to self-service portals and the mobile app we're launching this year as well as covering some specific sort of challenge-based discussions as well. Again, being joined by some of the guys today at RBH and some other of our customers as well. So do feel free, if you are there, feel free to come over and see us. We'll also be having Housing Solutions joining us as well on a talk. So we'll have 6 sessions across the 3 days. 3 of them will be sort of challenge focused, and 3 of them will be sort of guest speakers from our customers. RBH are going to be talking to us, expanding a little bit upon what we're talking about today. We have Housing Solutions on day 1, just on the next slide, Jen.
Thanks.
And then, yeah, Stockport Homes as well. We've got Nicola on with us today from Stockport Homes, is a big part of this. We're in the middle of delivering quite a large program of new websites for Stockport Homes Group. So we'll be talking to everyone about a little bit more detail about that. So as with all of these events, it's all about sort of consuming information, meeting people, but also freebies as well. So feel free to come over to our stand and see what we can hand over in terms of giveaways. But because it is driven from our stand, the space might be a little bit limited. So we've created a registration form. So if you are interested in any of these talks, feel free to hit that link and I suppose save your spot there, and we'll hopefully see you there. Great stuff. I can hand over to you now, Jen, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. That's great. Yeah, we'd love to see anyone that is travelling for CIH next month, which is, it's only a few weeks away now, isn't it? Yeah, we'd love to see you there. So we'll be there for the full event. You won't be able to miss us. Big, shiny caravan, one of those sort of Airstream style caravan, rocket caravans. It looks fab, but yeah, do come and find us and say hello. Okay, so on to today's topic, which is all about RBH, Rochdale Boroughwide Housing, and the work that we've been doing together over the last couple of years. For those that don't know, Rochdale Boroughwide Housing is the UK's first mutual housing association, so co-owned by tenants and employees. And they own and manage over 12,000 properties in Rochdale and the wider area, providing homes for, I think it's sort of around sort of 20,000 customers, which is fantastic. And they've recently published their new Succeeding Together strategic plan, which sets out their vision for the next 3 years, so taking them up to 2025. I'm joined today by Zoe Downham and Bede Nicholson, if you want to give everyone a wave.
Hi.
And we're going to be talking a little bit more really specifically about the journey that we've been on together over the last couple of years, where the kind of genesis of all that work started from, and ultimately kind of how RBH are making decisions about how they continue to evolve and iterate their online offer to meet changing needs of the organisation, changing needs of customers. And so we thought we'd start with just a little bit of a timeline, really, just in terms of our experience together. So we started working with RBH back in 2019 after a competitive tender. We then went into an initial consultancy period, and that consultation took in sort of every part of the organisation, but also we spent time talking to customers as well. And that was really as much as a way of cementing our relationship with RBH as us understanding in great depth kind of where the organisation was in terms of customer service, digital service offering, and ultimately what challenges needed to be addressed as part of what we were planning to do. And then in 2020, the first batches of work that we delivered were a new Umbraco website and new customer portal, which is called My RBH. And that was really phase one of this digital transformation journey from a customer-facing perspective for RBH. Now, since then, we are currently in the midst of phase two. Phase two so far has comprised some changes to the way repairs are handled and appointments are booked by customers through their portal, some enhancements to the website, improvements to inquiries diagnostics, making some enhancements and improvements to the portal dashboard. And we're also about to embark on a journey looking at digital signups for customers and adding more features into the portal. So we're always looking at ways that portal can be improved, enhanced, made more useful from a customer perspective, but ultimately also, very much focusing on what delivers efficiency for RBH teams, what supports those teams in their customer service efforts. And that sort of last piece of phase two will probably take us through the rest of this year and into early next year. And then next year and beyond kind of really is kind of all up for grabs at the moment. Early conversations about whether we look at things like AI, whether we look at mobile applications, who knows what might be in the mix then. We might be looking at drones, we might be looking at digital twins, all sorts of things on the table. But a really exciting journey that has evolved over time. And obviously, smack bang in the middle of all of that, we've had COVID. So there have been aspects of what we've done together that have been in direct response to COVID. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. So My RBH, in terms of the customer self-service portal, that has been a really big focus over the last couple of years. RBH came from a point of having an HMS vendor supplied portal, which was not well used, not well promoted, very basic in terms of features, and actually as a starting point of having a place where customers could check their rent balance and have a link to make a rent payment, and I think view a repair history list. It was quite a simple foundation to work from, but ultimately gave us a view that there's loads of improvement that we can make here. And actually this little snapshot is a view of what customers see when they log into My RBH. So a really friendly looking space where they get some very clear information conveyed to them at this top level within the portal. And they can check their rent balance, they can toggle between different accounts, they get a very clear readout if there are any messages or notifications that need their attention or need their action. But we also have some kind of softer self-service aspects as well, where we can provide, you'll see on the right of the rent area there, we've got some links to kind of different articles. We have the facility within the portal or to be able to kind of provide context-based links to other resources, news articles, content elsewhere, whether that's in the portal or the website. And as you'd expect with a sort of really well-rounded self-service platform, it does all the things we'd expect it to do for customers. So they can check their rent balance, but also make payments. They can report repairs and book appointments, but also edit and cancel those appointments. So the convenience factor for customers and the ability for that platform to reduce some volume in terms of calls coming into the contact centre is really great. We're also layering in a diagnostic approach for general inquiries, so that will go hand in hand with reporting repair problems to provide a really kind of symptom-based experience for customers. So rather than the customer being expected to understand how the housing association kind of categorizes and stores things, actually it's very customer-led. It's very, what is the problem or question that the customer has, and how can we then signpost them to the right place to handle that. So moving on, as much as those are some of the things that we've delivered from a project side of things, some of the other kind of tasks that we've been working on together that sit around that have included a really deep dive in terms of customer and colleague consultation, the website and portal that we talked about. But in support of the launch of these new platforms, we've also worked on campaigns and assets that RBH, Zoe and Bede can use internally and with customers to support familiarisation of some of these tools. We've created videos to support this. BS Bede, I don't know if you want to sort of comment on the sort of customer consultation side of things, because obviously that's really important from an RBH point of view.
Yeah, it is. Being a mutual is one of the main foundations that we do consult with our customers. But I think where a cohort of customers have initial access to the new functionality, and we can monitor that, and we can gain their insight and their feedback in order before we launch that to general release. And that proves really well. We don't do that with everything, but it is those where it's potentially a high impact, and make sure we can monitor that. We've got the development. There are other things. We have a rep body as well, where we engage with a representative body as well that we engage with, and that's established within the whole of RBH as well. Yeah. I don't know, Bede, if you want to add to anything on that.
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of covered it. I mean, I think the basic principle is that, I mean, obviously you've got your kind of focus groups and your kind of chat groups that you maybe get people around for coffee, but what we've found where we've got the most valuable insight is using those kind of, you might say, ongoing feedback tools like Hotjar feedback, screen recordings, heat maps, actually seeing not just what customers say, but what customers do to make improvements to the features and functionality. So you've got, I think, when it comes to kind of finding out what customers want, you might use kind of survey tools and what have you, but actually looking at what are the blockers, what are the pain points, how do we resolve those? Some of the kind of feedback technologies we found the most useful in kind of driving insights and taking actions from them.
I think internal promotion as well, from a colleague point of view, keeping colleagues up to date. We have a publication of it's called Five for Friday, which tells them the highlight points of what is happening within the business. So we utilise that quite a lot as well for new promotion. But we do hold individual sessions with colleagues as well that are impacted, our customer-facing colleagues as well. We hold drop-in sessions once we release new functionality and provide demos to them. One thing we have found is, due to time constraints, sometimes some colleagues are missed or they're not able to take opportunity to attend some of the demos. We have created now litmus training, so some training sessions, which is a mandatory session for training colleagues to attend. It's an online training session which gives them the overview of the portal, so that when they are discussing this with customers, they're able to understand what the functionality of that is. So that's due to be released. We have a whole raft of other information where we provide leaflets, other information that they can provide to customers as well when they're engaging face to face with them.
Yeah. I think that ongoing support for colleagues is really important. You highlighted the need to kind of support colleagues in becoming familiar with these tools. And actually one of the things we did early on when we were in the first tranches of the My RBH portal in particular was to put together some little kind of how-to videos. And initially these were thought of as very much customer facing, but actually internally quite significantly as well, haven't you?
Yes,
we have, and they're really good explainers, because it's kind of, when you're trying to, and particularly for people like, if you're in demos and you're a bit techie and, you see things simple. So we've used them extensively internally as well as externally.
Yeah, we've got a short example to share with you, and then we'll move on to the next slide. You might recognise the voice.
Did you know that you can save time by reporting repairs online? Simply log in to My RBH or register for your account if you haven't already. Once you're on My dashboard, simply click My Repairs, then select Raise a New Repair. To raise a new repair, you can use our keyword search or choose the type of repair you would like to report from the options shown on the screen. You can use this space to tell us a bit more about the problem. For some repair jobs, we'll ask you to select an appointment date and time to suit you. The RBH team will be in touch if you have not been asked to book an appointment slot. You can come back anytime to follow the progress of your repair and find out which are outstanding, completed or cancelled at the click of a button. If you need to change your appointment time, simply click Edit Repair and choose a new date and time that suits you. Requesting a repair has never been simpler with My RBH. Go online today.
We actually have a series of these little videos that support kind of rent payments, checking your rent balance, and also looking at kind of other requests to the RBH team. But even within that video, you know, we're seeing things now that actually we know we've improved and iterated on in the last sort of 12 months. So actually the repairs UI now looks simpler and cleaner for customers. So always kind of taking in that customer feedback. So you touched on the idea of that beta group. I think that'd be really interesting to hear a bit more about, in terms of how do you identify kind of those particular customers, how do you recruit for that group? How do you handle kind of communication and feedback and that insight generation with them?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising. I mean, in terms of getting the group, I mean, literally we promoted a link on our website saying basically, would you like, and we kind of sold it as a benefit of, would you like to be the first, you know, get first access to our new features coming through. We had a little Umbraco form that we linked in, got them to subscribe. We also, from some of our surveys, had asked customers who would be willing to provide us feedback as part of the survey questionnaire. So we developed a kind of core group around that. And obviously what just to kind of articulate how that works, obviously working with Proto, what we did is like feature switches essentially. So you can assign people and say you're to a group in Umbraco, and so essentially they're like beta user groups, and then we can switch. So when we launch, for example, when we launch you can update contact details, you know, all that side of things on the portal. We had a beta group. We had a feature only available to those users. And then from that, with some surveys in terms of response back, in terms of how people found those features, and also using kind of Hotjar contextual tools, that sort of stuff, to kind of get feedback from users on any issues. And we were able to identify some issues. For example, we had some feedback about a bug that was on there that we were able to very quickly resolve within the first day. So particularly useful in terms of kind of working with stakeholders, in terms of making sure that we're kind of managing potential demand into the contact center and what have you. So being able to roll things out, just reduce the kind of risk generally, rolling out to a smaller group rather than a big bang release and then having potential issues and then, you know, having to roll it back. So it was very useful.
There was a lot of monitoring with the customers and gaining direct feedback, but also engaging with the operations as well to make sure that they didn't have a significant impact and how they were handling it and what feedback they were getting from people, because we found that sometimes when people are using functionality, sometimes they maybe get confused and then they'll dial in and still call into the contact center. So it's getting that feedback. It's just two-way feedback. It's not just the digital side of it, it's also the customer and actual the voice where they come through to the contact center as well. And it's monitoring that and releasing that to a general release is making sure that you've got your operations on board as well to make sure that they're comfortable with it. And that goes through the whole range of training and getting them ready to accept it on a larger scale.
That's great. Yeah. But you mentioned also sort of Hotjar tracking in terms of looking at the sort of heat maps and screen recordings, and we've used that to influence a number of changes. So talk to us. I remember actually one early one was around the registration process, which you alluded to before. And actually it was a really simple thing that became a barrier that none of us in kind of designing this or building this would actually have thought would become a barrier. And it was around the date picker and how the date picker presented when people were choosing their date of birth. It was such a simple thing to actually understand from customer feedback and customer interaction, and that helped us make a simple tweak that then kind of removed that barrier for people to be able to move through and register effectively. But we also use that insight to then kind of create a sort of pre-registration process for the portal as well. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. I think what we were noticing in the Hotjar recordings, when it came to the date of birth picker, we were noticing you do those kind of heat maps, and also from the heat maps, we were recognizing there seemed to be this huge kind of red point around. I think it's the red point around the date picker, and we could see that people were spending a lot of time on the date picker. And then we went from the heat map, then started looking at the recordings and seeing that people were struggling with the way that they were using the date picker. So obviously what we did from that point forward was work with Proto to kind of make some updates to that, to make that easy to use. And that definitely resulted in a reduction in the amount of time that people were spending on registering. As well as that, Jenny, I'd kind of mentioned we also, where we kind of probably had our most dramatic results, as we looked at one of the big blockers that we were seeing from our Hotjar recordings was the fact that customers needed to know the customer reference number, and we had issues with customers just not knowing that, and we saw that as a kind of major blocker. So we worked with Proto to kind of adapt that and change that and remove that requirement, and we saw something along a kind of 354% increase in the conversion rate from just that one small change. And that very much came from kind of watching those Hotjar recordings, seeing where people were struggling. And so there was a kind of constant process of iterating through the registration, making, you mentioned the pre-reg, where we could kind of create a link that we would send via email that pre-populates certain fields, so it'd speed up the process. That was kind of the first stage. And then we moved into kind of actually just removing the requirement for a customer reference. That was the second stage. And through that, we've had our conversion rate has from when we started to where we are now has really increased dramatically. So that's been a really good, I suppose, good example of where you use insight.
Yeah, the customer reference number thing was interesting because, again, when you think about self-service solutions, you think about secure registration and login, there needs to be some means of uniquely identifying the customer, but actually, the feedback we were getting that not only do customers just not have this information to hand necessarily, it was causing a really dramatic increase in terms of calls coming in just to find this information, or requests coming through the website to be able to find this information in order to support registrations. So, being mindful of obviously the general aspiration being to reduce avoidable contact. That was something that we had to kind of sort of pivot around quite rapidly to get a solution in place.
So absolutely. And I think it was something that, you kind of just, because when I kind of started that, obviously I was kind of joined a little bit after the development, but obviously it's one of those things it's easy to just think, well, that's the way you do it. And then you kind of have to stop and think outside the box and go, well, is that the way we have to do it? Is there some other alternatives? And that's made a big difference. And even though we kind of sent out customer reference numbers through emails and through mails, you could see through the screen recordings, customers were just getting stuck at that point, basically. So I think that's kind of a good example where that iterative development, where we've been analyzing data, watching what customers, not just what they're saying, but what they're doing, and making changes progressively. Really, we made quite a few changes to the registration process even since I've started, and I think we'll continue to do so, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it? And how do you balance that kind of insight and data with what the business is asking of you? What the business is telling you need to do operationally, or from a service point of view. How do you weigh those things in the balance?
It's prioritization, really. So we do have the roadmap for delivering, and it is priority, and it's looking at what is having an impact most. So for a lot of the feedback that we identify as improvements, which is continuous improvement, it's that product development life cycle, we will include some of those improvements in the next sprint or the next iteration of development, and we'll add those pieces in. Depends on the size of the functionality or the development that we're doing as well. But we do regular reviews with the business to look at what else will suit the business. It's always changing. So from when we had the roadmap initially to where we are now, the main functionality, the core functionality, has remained the same, but its a priority sometimes may change. And COVID was a really good example of where everything was thrown up in the air and you had to react to. We're now getting more to a stable sort of operations. So we converse regularly, whether it's on a weekly or a monthly basis, with different departments to review how they're performing, what type of activities they're doing on behalf of customers, and whether we can shift that onto the portal, and whether or not it's going to be an easy shift, or whether it's actually doable as well, because sometimes you've got to have that one-to-one conversation. Some of them are too complex, but the more transactional activities we can shift on there, that's what we review continuously, and we'll look at sometimes getting the quick wins in, and then we'll plan in the further development later on in sort of phases.
Yeah, it's that impact effort kind of matrix, isn't it? You know, sort of like sort of quick wins that might have a high impact, and then support, you know, the longer term aspirations where you might have higher effort, but ultimately get some big impact from those changes as well.
Yeah, I think the COVID thing as well was a good example where I think the solution we've created with Pareto is quite flexible. Like, for example, when COVID happened, we had to suddenly, with our repairs bookings, we had to kind of look at how do we, because you're moving out of different, depending on where we were in the lockdown restrictions, we'd have different kind of schedules for when we could get repairs done. And we had like a red, amber, green kind of status, and we built that in. And now we've got a kind of quite a flexible system that we can kind of say, okay, if God forbid we have to go into restrictions again, we can just move over to a red status, and then that updates all the kind of scheduling and appointment parameters that we work from with our customers as well. So, you know, that was a business demand that we weren't expecting, that suddenly we had to kind of build in basically the solution.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I know when we started on this journey, I think the sort of original aspiration was to get to, I think, a sort of a first target of 40% of RBH customers registered to use the portal and transacting online. How are you tracking with that, and how are things looking now, and what's the next goal that you're looking at?
So the original targets that were set were very ambitious, extremely ambitious. There's no benchmarking, and the data that is available within housing associations is quite limited, and it's varied, and how people report is not the same way. So it's really hard to get a benchmark. We are now at 49%. I know a lot of housing associations that are less than that, or ones that are been operating with a full portal model, are only at 50%. They've never really breached that. We're looking at adding additional functionality into the portal, engaging again with customers, not just colleagues, but customers as well, on what would they like to see. We've been able to do some really good analytics around, and it's around Google Analytics, around which certain activities or transactions are looking and utilising, and we're hoping then we can leverage that. That's just in the early stages. But we've done a survey as well, on the portal, which attained 82% satisfaction, which is extremely, we surpassed what we expected, and we had a target of 78. We're hoping to go and target up to 64 registered users. There are the cohort of customers, when we've done surveys, that have shown no interest at all, and they are generally the over 65s population of customers. Some just have no interest whatsoever. Yeah, the comments we get back are they're too old to start learning to do something new, even though they may go on social media. So we're looking to do an educational program with our customers that shows that the portal is not much different from doing social media, and hopefully a mobile app in the future will help that transition along to make it a lot easier as well. So it's in a format that's a little bit more maybe familiar with them when they've used other social media or other mobile apps as well. But we're hoping to target going up to 60%. So it's looking at using additional online registrations, so onboarding and photo file uploads, which will have numerous benefits just for repairs, but also for those onboarding to have access to their documents as well. So there's a lot of benefits that we're hoping that should be able to realise, and it's bringing that attraction to the portal more, what's in it for the customer, and using that usability for their benefit. But we're also looking to utilise the portal for more fun, more interesting things that happen in the community. That's one area we're looking to explore, maybe promoting things that happen in their area that they live in, if we can get demographic information specific to them. That's a new idea that we're looking for, customer engagement. So it's just trying to have see it from a customer's perspective, really.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think the basic kind of when we initialized the portal, obviously a big focus was on channel shift. and making efficiencies. And that's still a focus in terms of what we're wanting to do. And I think we're quite happy, where we've hit with the registrations. I think, for considering how the time frame, we're reasonably okay with where we're at the moment. But I think there's definitely now, and part of that is a kind of focus on not just getting customers registered. And I just noticed a question just coming up about automatic registrations, and someone asking about that. But I think the issue is once they've registered, what do they do? And how do you, beyond just even the transactional stuff? So for example, reporting repairs, making payments. I mean, there's that basic transactional, which is great, but not all customers are reporting repairs. Not all customers are, some customers are making payments through direct debit. So it's about how do we bring more kind of value to the customer from the portal beyond just the basic kind of transactional. And that's where some of this, Jenny mentioned the general inquiries diagnostic and more self-help tools and those sorts of additional benefits that it's really about kind of getting more of our customers kind of logging in more frequently and getting more value from that. So not just the value we're trying to extract from customers, but what value we can give to them as well.
I think it depends on the strategy. Our strategy for the portal has changed from when it's first started, and it was mainly quite an aggressive digital first. Digital first is always been, we're going to support digital and that digital program, and there's a lot of support around that and investment into that. But because of we are there to support customers, and there are a lot of vulnerable customers. We don't want to be pushing digital onto people who maybe not feel comfortable, because that is then neglecting those customers. So we have acknowledged that there is still the need for contact centre and not forcing people down for various reasons they may not feel, but it's mainly encouraging them. So it's taken from that point. And we realise that might not translate into as much of a channel shift as what it was originally anticipated. But rather than the stick, we are rather now using a carrot approach and it seems to be working as well, but it's engaging and saying, what would you want to see on that portal, as well as part of that transactions that we can transfer onto the portal from an operational point of view. So we're left to deal with the more complex queries that the portal can't deal with, that you need that human interaction with. So we have shifted around the strategy and the direction of how we were going to shift or channel shift some of those targets as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important message, isn't it? The sort of channel of choice rather than the default is really important for customers feeling like they're not being pushed down a road that they're not comfortable with, and actually the customers that aren't comfortable with that approach still have the more traditional channels available to them for support. That's wonderful. Well, I think we've got a few questions that have come through the chat. Jake, what have you got for us?
We have, yeah. I think you may have answered a couple of them along the way. The first one was from Helen, just asking if, as part of the repairs submission process, a photo upload available there, so customer can add a photo of what the defect is.
Not yet, but that is in the pipeline. So we've got general diagnostics in development at the moment, so it's in testing at the moment. We have, as part of the next phase, we have digital onboarding and photo file uploads, and I'm going through at the moment with borders to have a look at the operations, to have a look at priorities. At the moment where it's sitting, it seems to be that photo file upload is going to be the first one to deliver, but there are a lot of back-end investigation that we're undergoing to make sure that it will integrate correctly with our back-end solution as well. So there are some constraints and dependencies around that. So that's where we might need a bit longer time, and that's where we'll get the priorities in as well. So it's not just around operations, they're both as important as each other, but the photo file upload, once we've got that, we'll be able to utilise that across multiple different areas.
Great. Good stuff. Hopefully that answers your question okay. And then Vic from PA had one just asking about the security authentication process. So when someone's registering or logging in, I suppose, would be registering, how do you sort of recognise that they're a customer along with the customer reference number? Is there other sort of other data matches you're looking for?
Yeah, so what we have at the moment is that we operate from first name. We basically match on first name, last name, date of birth, and postal code. We also have an optional of the customer reference and national insurance as a match, and we checked that. Obviously, we went through with our legal team and what have you in terms of data protection, and they were satisfied with that. And then essentially what happens if there are any issues with that data not matching, rather than putting the onus on the customer, it will generate a task in our CRM. Basically, if someone, say for example, we've got the put in information and it's not correct, it will generate a task. Now, if what we do have a check, so we don't create too many tasks, is that we also have a postal code checker. So we check across the postal code to see, is it actually an RBH tenancy? So if they don't put in the right it never generates a task or otherwise, because obviously you can get a lot of people on who aren't even tenants signing up for whatever reason that may be. So we've got a kind of checker on that. And that's worked really, really well in terms of, because we, I'm sure most housing associations, there's some data that isn't always perfectly clean. So, we want to be able to accommodate for that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Makes sense. Thanks for that, Pete. And then Will had one around SOR code. So how do you incorporate SOR code management within the diagnostics of the portal?
That would be a question for Liam, who's our technical integration specialist. I know we do. Don't ask me exactly how that works. I mean, what we've got SOR. We essentially, without getting too technical about it, we've got like a table. We've worked with Proto, like a diagnostic mapping for all of our path. We'll have kind of a pathway code, basically, which represents a pathway in the portal, and that matches to kind of an SOR code, and then it kind of communicates. But our integration specialist will be able to articulate that maybe a bit better than me, but it's through a kind of mapping process, essentially. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
That's exactly right, Bede. And that mapping process then allows this sort of job as it's reported via the portal to marry up with an SOR code that has meaning in the housing management system to be able to create the job and then return the job number and move that along through the appointing process. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Cool, great stuff, thank you. And then another one from Bikram, which was, how much time or commitment did it take you to manage the feedback from customers via the Hotjar feedback alongside? Was that a dedicated role, or was that just sort of baked into your day roles?
Baked into my job,
right?
Basically. So, look, it depends. I mean, Hotjar feedback, I get alert notifications with it. I mean, to be honest, what other HAs may find this as well, that, sometimes the feedback you're getting is not actually about the portal itself. It's about the repairs that are going on or something else. And so some of it really is just forwarding that feedback onto other departments, particularly with repairs. But yeah, I mean, the Hotjar feedback and that sort of things I manage. I spend basically half an hour to 45 minutes of my day dealing with not just Hotjar, but also registration issues or whatever's coming in that day. And I'll generally tend to spend also use that time as well to actually just review a couple. I always find just to review a couple of recordings of what people are doing. So I'll see the recordings. I always find that's a really good kind of thing to just keep in touch with what's going in the portal. And you'd be amazed just every time I go on, there's like, oh, that's happened, or oh, that's this issue, or oh, that gives me an idea. It's just a way of seeing, because you can think what customers are doing in your head based on the design, but actually what they're doing, there's some weird stuff that goes on. Like we had a person that was like, we're having duplicate repairs, and we had people lodging a repair, spelling it incorrectly, then going back and lodging another repair, cancelling that, just things that you think, why would someone do that? So strange. But so yeah, so that's all that I'm going into another train there, but yeah, that's probably 45 minutes a day.
Makes sense. Great stuff. Thanks, Pete. And then we're slowly running out of time, or quickly running out of time. We have got a handful more, which was another one from Anna was asking what systems you use. Are there multiple systems for CRM, for payments, for repairs, tickets, and scheduling? How does that look?
Yeah, obviously there's multiple integration points with open housing, with Capita CRM, DRS, a variety of different systems that we work, but that would be the main three ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. And some of that connection is kind of handled by Proto in terms of API connections. Some of it is handled by RBH. Bede referenced the sort of IT team in terms of some of the integration work they've set up connectors that essentially plug in some of the gaps that the APIs don't give us. So it's all kind of handled in a beautiful spaghetti. But yeah, I think that probably kind of wraps us up in terms of time. I think if there are questions that we've not been able to cover, we will wrap those up in a follow-up to today's event. But just very quickly, I wanted to hand back to Jake for a couple of closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Yeah. Before we finish, I suppose just a bit of a reminder on the Housing Hive live events or sessions that we'll be having at CIH's Housing 2022 event in Manchester in the June. So yeah, feel free, please do register a place on there, because as I say, there may be limited space there. So yeah, feel free to hit the link and save a spot for the ones that you're interested in.
Brilliant. And thank you so much, Zoe and Bede, for today. That's been really, really interesting. Hope everyone found it useful. And there will be a follow-up. We'll be in touch with everyone. You'll get access to the recording of today. So yeah, thank you all for your time. Great to see you all.